Today's episode of Wine and Dime is sponsored by Rooted Planning Group, a fee-only financial planning firm that believes life is about events, supported by your dollars and cents. And we want to help you achieve your goals. Hop on over to www.rootedpg.com to learn more about the services. Every week, it's my goal to share financial information that helps you in both your life and Financial Vineyard. We hope it takes you from your roots to the journey of your vines and the influences in the air that have helped craft your delicious life. Like wine, life and finances have different palates that should be celebrated and not judged. Well, welcome back to the show, Kerrie. We're glad to hear you on one of our final episodes in November of 2022. I can't believe we're down to 1 month. Oh, where is this year gone?
I know. Crazy.
And, we've been talking this month about estate planning. One of the things that we've said along the way is heading into the holidays, it's often a time where families get together quite frequently and seems like, are able to talk about some of the estate planning things or some of the things around estate planning, even if it's not specific to that. It seems like it comes up in topic in general. You've got a wide variety of estate planning going on in your household, from a teenage girl to a couple of parents that are, close by, to your own estate planning going on. So
yes.
fun time in the Beene household, huh?
Yes. A lot of moving parts at that age where I'm in the middle, I guess.
Yeah, you're a fun sandwich generation when it comes to that. Just out of curiosity, what are some of the things that you and Alan have talked about on the lines of estate planning?
So we had our estate plan set up, when our children were a little bit younger, just having some of those documents in place in case something happened to both of us was really, really important to us, and making sure our kids were taken care of. So that was something we did, a few years ago, obviously not as quickly as we should have. But we did, we did do that, and we worked through, I think us both having, parents that aren't married anymore, and then we have siblings and things like that. We had worked through who would want to make healthcare decisions for us if we were in a car wreck together and couldn't make them for each other. And I think when you have, big families, you're grateful for that. But also, you kind of need to decide who's going to make those decisions for you. So we had worked through some of those things previously. And
Kerrie, not to interrupt you, but I'm curious, you mentioned having parents that are divorced and remarried, actually,
through some of those,
and having a blended family. How did that change the complexity of your situation?
I think for us, when we think about our children, which they're older now, but at the time when we set it up, it is hard because you don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. But at the same time, you have to ultimately do what you feel like is right, and make sure your wishes are heard. So we just really talked through, not only who do we want to do it, but does that person have the ability to let our kids have the life that they could potentially have had with us? Can whoever you're, leaving your children with, take them to all the things? Because kids are so busy these days. Sure, there are plenty of people that would want to take care of them, but having to think through all of that, because with sports and school activities and things, kids have a lot going on. So it's easy to say you'll do something, but it's not as easy when it actually all the running around has to go on. So that was something we talked about as well.
And you have another complexity in that, not so much now, but a little while ago, you had a sibling that was quite a bit younger than you. What were some of the ideas that your parents had around that?
Yeah. So my dad and stepmom had set up their estate planning documents a few years ago. And my brother and I have a half sister who's she's actually 15 years younger than I am. And so working through all those questions and kind of helping guide them through that process, that we use an attorney. And it was actually really helpful, and it allowed them to think through, if something did happen to them, what do they want my younger sister to have the ability to do, and leave specific instructions for the trustee, because at the time she was in her early 20s, and my parents were fearful that if they just handed over if she was the beneficiary of one of their accounts, or even a partial amount on one of their accounts, would she make wise decisions? And it allowed them they ended up setting up a trust, which allowed them to set up some different steps and said, by this age, we would like to allow her to have these things. And then it seems like there was a stepping stone of maybe like 30 and 35 or something like that. So that was really helpful.
And it sounds like they set up a revocable trust. Is that correct?
I believe so. I would have to go back and look, but that sounds accurate.
So maybe this is a good opportunity as I'm thinking through this. This wasn't really planned, but a lot of people don't know the difference between an irrevocable trust and a revocable trust. So maybe taking a few minutes to just sort of walk through that and explain what those two trusts, what the difference kind of is between the two.
Yeah, for me, it's just a big picture. And I'll probably let you explain that a little bit more. But when you just think about the words revocable and irrevocable, can you make changes? It's the big question. Can I make a change to my will or trust once it's set up?
Yeah, and a revocable trust allows you to make those changes, where an irrevocable trust kind of pushes it off and says it's no longer your asset in the most cases. So you're actually moving money out of your estate, and now those changes are irrevocable. And a lot of people use them in ways I've seen, like Medicare trusts are often irrevocable trusts, that sort of thing. But it sounds like your parents were probably leaning more towards, I just want to make sure that if, she inherits something, that she has a little bit of a barrier in time to mature in order to manage the money.
Right.
And some people will form a trust under the will. We've seen where an actual trust is not formed during somebody's lifetime, but instead they'll have language in their will that says, if my child is under the age of such and such, and then a trust should be formed for their care and benefit until they reach these certain milestones. So sometimes it's not an actual trust that's established. It's under the will. They'll call it trusts that are established. So just kind of FYI for people that might be listening and have heard these terms. So, that's a complexity. And then, your children have delightful sets of grandparents, but because both of your parents were married and remarried, they had more than normal sets of grandparents, right? I wouldn't say normal. I guess they would have the normal in today's world, but they have more than just your mom and dad. They have your mom and dad and your stepmom and your stepdad that also very much act like grandparents to your children, like actual biological grandparents. Yeah. And that's just your side. And then you've got Alan's side as well. So there's another layer of complexity and siblings involved in that case. So yeah, fun blended family stuff.
Yes. Fun, but sometimes complicated.
Yeah. So you guys sat down as the kids started to age. Have you changed any of the language in your plans?
No, we actually need to do that. And actually, what's strange is my daughter made a comment the other day. She's turned 20 in October, so she's 20, and my son is 16. And she had made a comment a while back that if something had happens to us right now, that she wants to be responsible for my son. And I was like, well, I don't, that's a very lengthy conversation, but she's in college. And while I appreciate her, caring about her brother enough to make that comment, and I don't even know what we were talking about for her to say that. But it's something that we do need to update, because now, her being age 20, she may think that that's, the best idea and that's what should happen. But do we agree? And, what does that look like for her life? So it definitely is something we need to update and needs to be talked about. Hopefully nothing happens, but I think it's one of those things people think, oh, well, I've got all my things set up and put in place, but life passes so quickly and time changes things that it needs to be something, I know in our practice, we at least try to talk to clients about, are there any changes in your life? Do your estate planning documents need to be updated? And sometimes that feels like, oh, why are we always asking these questions? But the truth is life happens and time passes quickly. And just like in our situation, our documents do need to be updated.
Yeah. So we typically tell people to review that about every 3 to 5 years, especially as I would say when their kids are younger, because about every 3 to 5 years, things changing along those lines. But that's not to say that once you get to 65 or 70, you shouldn't review them every 3 to 5 years either. And it's not just your will and your trust documents. It's also your power of attorney and your healthcare proxy. And every year we encourage people to review their beneficiaries.
Yes.
There's been a number of times that, we've said to somebody, here's who your beneficiary is. And they are like, oh, well, I didn't really want that. Like, well, it's been that way for 3 years.
Yeah.
So I guess we better change that.
Yeah. I was thinking about that earlier, mentioning my daughter, she opened a Roth IRA when she was a minor. And then now we've transitioned it to it's a regular Roth IRA. And so when we were making that change and talking about it, she's not married and she's in college. So talking to her about who her beneficiary should be. And then, she may be married in the next 4 or 5 years. So that's something that she'll be changing and updating. So it does happen quickly.
Any suggestions as people? I know it's not the most fun topic to talk about, but are there fun ways that you and your family have brought this topic up and have discussed it that listeners might be able to use that technique in order to do the same thing with their family?
I don't know that fun comes to mind. I think there can be, with my dad and stepmom, I think they were actually going on vacation with my sister. And they went to Australia, and it provoked an opportunity for me to bring it up. So I think while, they were getting to go do something fun, a lot of those things, things can happen when they're gone. And I just use that as an opportunity to bring up to my dad and stepmom, like, hey, not that I think anything's going to happen to you guys, but if something did, we would love for things to be taken care of ahead of time. So walking them through that and getting them started on that. And it's one of those things. I think it can be a hard conversation, but I think it's better to have those hard conversations, especially in blended families like I come from and my husband comes from. The more you can get taken care of ahead of time, even when the conversations are hard, when you're true and authentic to your heart and you really just want what's best for your parents, I think getting that stuff out and talking about it ahead of time is so important. Not waiting until it's too late.
Yeah, not waiting until it's too late, because that causes some additional family drama often on top of an already dramatic and hard situation. And when you think about little tips to talk to your children about, this is not a topic that you won't necessarily want to have. Hey, if something happens to mom and dad, especially at the age that your kids are at, talking to them about you not being around may be very challenging for them to hear. I think that Raylan is an amazing young lady, and she just is she's an old soul, I would call her. She just has a lot. She thinks a lot more maturely than a lot of people her age do, in my experience. But what are some of the ways that you guys have brought that up that even would have prompted her to say, hey, if something ever happens, I want to take care of my brother?
Yeah, I think just the closeness of the four of us were really close, and just knowing how important the last few years of his high school, finishing out high school and her thinking through, him wanting him to have the same life he has right now. I think that's probably just, I cannot remember what prompted that conversation. But just, I don't know, thinking through that, and she's very thoughtful and everything, but we're fortunate that my parents live close by, and so I'm sure it would work out fine. But I can't think of necessarily anything particular that we probably actually need to have an updated conversation about that. And just talk through everything with them, what would happen, and actually probably making my daughter aware of who we put as trustee on our estate planning documents, because I don't even think she's aware of, and in her mind, she's probably thinking, well, I'm 20 and these are my parents and this is my responsibility. But, when we set those documents up, we didn't do that. So she's not, set up as the trustee, and knowing her, she'll want to make sure everything's taken care of. But letting her know and making her understand, like, this is how it's set up and these are the reasons we've set this up this way. So maybe educating her around, and even my son, he'll be 17 soon, and just making them aware of, like, this is what we did and this is why we did it. It's to protect you,
Right.
So, you don't have to worry about some of the things that you shouldn't have to at this point in your life. So just that conversation needs to happen.
Yeah. And I think as we head in, I mean, you all will be together around the holidays. Everybody will be home and you'll engage in conversations. And I think your kids are old enough and mature enough. And I think that maturity factor does come into play, but I think they're old enough and mature enough and you can bring it up in such a way that it's kind of like you said, I don't know that fun is a good definition of that, but it's educational, and
it is for sure.
And in a way that it's not threatening, like there's nothing wrong with you. Your health is good. All that is great. But it's something that at least you know that, because again, Raylan, I think would wonder why you didn't name her, not realizing that these documents were drafted well before she was her current age, right?
Right.
And at what point in time would you make that modification and change to actually have her named as your trustee? And that's something that you and Alan may have a conversation with her about, as well as yourselves, as she gets a little bit older and more mature. And then I know a lot of people what I've seen them done, and this is not legal advice in any way, shape, or form. It's something you should talk to your attorney about if you're interested. But there have been a few cases where a family has named, let's say, their 22 or 23-year-old as their executrix or executor or as the trustee, and they've named what's called a trust protector alongside it. So it's somebody that kind of is there to help guide, you through the process should something ever happen. And that way they don't feel completely alone with the process, nor can they be taken advantage of, hopefully, because of the trust protector. But that's just another kind of little tip if you have some young adults that are named as your executor or trustee or executrix, just in general. Any other tips that you would want to mention to people as we wrap up the end of the fun season? Haha, I laugh, and I have air quotes, fun season of estate planning conversations, and move into the holidays?
The only thing that really comes to my mind is I think a lot of people think, I don't know if a lot of people think it, but just in general, some will say, I don't necessarily think that we need a trust, or they don't understand what a trust is. And I think it was really helpful for me when I was learning about estate planning that a trust is just something that helps you distribute your assets over time versus, a will just naming someone, or a beneficiary, this money goes to this person. A trust just allows you a little bit more flexibility. And I encourage people to not be, intimidated by that process of setting up a trust. It's not just for, ultra wealthy people. It can be for everyone. And thinking through, like, for example, my sister being so young, that trust allowed my parents to set it up in a way where she's able to receive some money at this age and some other money at another age, which is probably how we should have that conversation for my children. If something happened to both of us, we don't want them, although they are good kids and they're smart, I'm not sure they're ready to make big financial decisions at this point in their life. So I think a trust is something that if you don't understand it, or you're just intimidated by that process, it's something to seriously consider and don't be intimidated by it.
Yeah. Thank you for that tip. I think it's great. Well, Kerrie, thanks so much for being on the show today. And for those that have been waiting patiently for the wine recommendation, I will tell you that we're wrapping up the month with Airlie Winery. Airlie was one of the wineries that we visited out in Oregon. Monmouth was the name of the town that Airlie was located in. And they have some amazing holiday gift ideas on their website currently available. Brent and I received our first club pack as subscribers to their club and have been so delighted delighted with the wines that we've been tasting. So their website, if you're interested, is Airlie Winery. We'll put it in the show notes, but they do have some really great holiday packages out there. If you're looking for something unique and different to send your friends and family, we would recommend them. We've been very delighted by the wine coming out of that region. And Kerrie, if you were closer, I would share a bottle of wine with you, but I have to do one instead. Well, thanks for being on the show again, Kerrie. I hope you and your family have a wonderful holiday. And for those of you listening, we hope that you enjoyed today's show. We ask you to hop on over if you can and share it with your friends if there's something in particular that you liked. We always appreciate you as our listeners and would love it if you would share it with your friends and families and rate us on iTunes so that more people like you can find us. Happy holidays, everyone.
And that will about do it for today's episode of Wine and Dine. You can contact Amy through the website, www.rootedpg.com, or amy@rootedpg.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram @rootedpg for the latest news. And if you have any questions, comments, or topics you would like to hear about, feel free to let us know. And don't forget to rate and subscribe the show wherever you get your podcasts. And again, thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in next time.